Now it does. Okay, I'd like to call our Finance and Audit meeting for May 8th to order at 8:30 a.m. We have all members present except for Terry and Eric. Terry is potentially calling in, maybe, so Dan will let me know if she does, and then we can allow her to call in remotely. We have minutes for approval. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for April 3rd. Larry and John, any questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Scott, we got any public comment?
We have none, sir. Anybody? Last call?
No one wants to speak? All right. Member comments? None? All right. We're down to routine consent agenda. Are there items that members would like to have pulled? Brian, we'll start with you.
7.4.
4. Is that it?
Yes, for right now. I want to make sure another one's off. But will be, and 7.6, sorry.
6. Okay, John?
7.1, 7.13, and 7.14.
13. And 14. Carolyn, do you have anything?
I just had a question on the numbers. I think it's 7.9.
9.
I think it's 7.9.
That's the telephone.
Yeah, it's just that they don't add up to the total.
All right, go forward, not a problem. Do you have any others?
I don't really know. No, I think what's been pulled so far?
We have 1, 4, 6, 9, 13, and 14.
Okay, that's fine.
Larry?
7, 7, 7, 8.
7, 7, 7, and 7, 8?
Yes, please.
Good thing everyone showed up today. We got lots of things to talk about. All right. Any others? So the ones that I don't have pulled are 7, 2, 3, 5, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17. Yep, is that all good?
Right.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve those items. Brian? Carolyn, we'll vote. Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries. Okay, so let me just cross those all off here. You got fortunate enough to leave. Oh, see? All right, we're on to item 7.1. I'll entertain a motion. John and Larry, and John, you pulled this one?
Yeah, this is more of a comment. I know we cannot do anything with this. The Mental Health Board's already approved these temporary compensation.
Yep.
I just want to I'll be voting no against this in our meeting. I think asking us for temporary compensation is not called for. You know, one of the big things coming out of the Mental Health Board is their funding, and we're asking them to compensate people for work that I believe is going to be happening during the normal course of the business day. So just wanted to make that comment regarding that funding.
Okay. Anything else? All right, we'll go to vote then. John?
No.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, motion carries. We're on to item 7.4. I'll entertain a motion. Brian and John. Brian, you pulled this one?
Yeah, the only reason I pulled this is, and I know it's gone through administrative services, but I again am going to indicate, and I'll indicate this as we're talking about 7.62. It seems to me that we ought to have kind of a standard time of the year where reclassifications occur so that we don't see these quite as often, if you will, across the calendar. So I kind of like to move into that type of format, but I'm not going to oppose these. I'm going to support them, but I just want to make that comment.
That sounds like a good discussion for item 7.6.
Yes, I think it does.
All right. Go ahead, John.
And just a real quick comment. I know that transportation and finance are working on this since January. trying to coordinate and talk about redesigning different positions so that people in transportation were in the right jobs in the right places, and finance was in the same way. And while I agree with what you're saying, I think that this was a good example of different departments working together to save money for us and meet the needs of the county.
Well, I just wanted
Hi,
to.
Carrie, good morning.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to comment on the timing, because I knew that, you know, you guys have been commenting to Stevie's only at specific times. But I think this one is especially important for us because we're just finishing the financial audit. So summer is kind of a slower time, I guess, for the accounting side of our office, the audit side. So I thought it was really important to have this new position in with us in finance over the summer because there's more time for training, also a little bit more time for her to help out at DOT as they transition as well. So yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
I don't disagree. I mean, obviously, I'm going to support this. I think it's the right thing to do, and I agree that we're trying to save money across the department, so I'm grateful for that. I would suspect, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I would suspect that this happens probably every summer. These types of things, maybe. So I'm just hoping that maybe we can get it all together sometime so that we're looking ahead for these types of things and we can kind of bring it forward maybe twice a year to the committee or the board or something like that. But I don't disagree that it's something that you're trying to do for the benefit of the body. So I appreciate that.
Okay, anything else? Yes, Larry.
I was reading this and I just got curious. It says the total annual savings of $10,698. And then you read through the paragraph a little further, it says this can be absorbed into the current 25 budget. And I thought the wording was a little weird. If it's saving this money, why are we saying it can be absorbed? Or am I missing something?
So I wanted to be transparent because the general fund is going to increase and the
Okay.
highway fund is going to decrease.
Okay.
So the general fund, it can be absorbed within the finance general fund department.
Okay.
So in total, across the two funds, it's a reduction.
Okay.
We'll nail transportation in the budget year. Oh, did I just say that out loud? Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? If not, we'll go to vote on 7-4 then. Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries. On to item 7-6. I'll entertain a motion. Brian and Larry. Hey, Carrie, come on down.
I know.
Okay, Brian, you pulled this one?
Yeah, and I did just for the reason that we've just been talking about. I think maybe we ought to build something like that into our budget policy, if you will. So that's just a suggestion that I have, and we come up with a couple times in the year and that way staff can know that those are the dates that are coming forward and we need to be moving reclassifications together before the body. But the other reason I called it is because of page 6, down at the very, very bottom, it talks about allocated cost grants, right? And then it goes to 7, and on the next page, and it says, through the state of Illinois award. I'm not sure that I understand what that means. It's kind of like missing something in there. And so I raised that, and I think there's one other place where that occurs. Carolyn, do you know?
Where whatever's at the bottom isn't matching up with the top of the next page. It's like it's not, it almost seems like the line should go through the whole thing, but there's a last
Right.
word, or there's a last sentence.
Oh, for the de minimis rate? Is that what you're?
No, if you go to page 6,
Well, that's page,
allocated cost grants, and the top of page 7, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
so even if you look at 2 to 3, it was one of them, page 2 going into 3, and then 6 going into 7. So if you look at scenarios, G, the county board has directed county administration to develop budget scenarios. Then everything is crossed out that was in red, and then it says, small t, the assumption that the prior budget will decrease by 3%.
Okay.
So it's just, it's not set up with one, like the rest of them are. Scenario 1 is this.
So
So you look at
let
page
me work
3.
with Kathy because it must just be how it is posted in eScribe because it's not how it is on Word.
Okay, it may be just the way it's printing, right,
Yeah.
coming out to us, that's fine. And then that goes, and then, so that's the one I noticed, and then the 6 going into 7.
Yeah. 2, 3, and 6 to 7.
And then also, Carrie,
But for that, just real quickly, okay, direct allocation, so it's just, I think through the state of Illinois award needs to be crossed out, is that what you were thinking, Brian? Because it just doesn't seem to be, need to be there.
So so I took out, we used to not take the indirect cost rate, so that's the part that's crossed out. And the sentence that should be there is, the county has elected the de minimis rate, 15% of modified total direct costs to any federal pass-through and state of Illinois award.
Oh, pass through and say,
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, we're not seeing any of that.
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
seeing any of that.
and then in 1P, the, 1, 2.
What page are you on?
This will be page 5. The third bullet point from the top. I think you're just missing the word B.
Carrie, are you able to throw this up on the screen,
sure.
what you have? Because,
It's a little wonky.
yeah,
Yeah.
what we have is not,
Okay.
I saw because I read what you sent me.
Okay.
So I
I'm
didn't
sorry,
see
I didn't-
this, because I'll be honest, I didn't
Yeah.
read it because I read what you sent me. So but what I just pulled up is it is not
Okay.
formatted properly, so I guess the best way to put it.
So the other thing's not there.
So I apologize to the committee, because I read what Carrie sent me, so I didn't read this. So when you're like, it doesn't match up, I'm like,
Does it match up?
yeah. I pulled it up, and I agree.
So I can just
Okay, besides formatting, does anyone else have any other?
Well, in page 5, the third bullet point from the top, I think it says in Fund 211 shall in the county's financial system only. I think it should be shall be in the county's financial system.
Okay.
It's missing a word.
It's missing a word. And then that's the only other spot I saw, besides the other things we just talked about.
So can I bring up a different topic? So this budget policy reflects having 5 scenarios again. And one of the things that I had talked about with this committee and subsequently has talked about that we're gonna have a pre-budget meeting in June to kind of talk through the budget and what we're doing. And again, my hope out of that meeting is to provide from the board some clear direction as to how to build the budget. And as we talked about here, I really don't appreciate at the last minute trying to manipulate things. It's not good for the staff to provide direction. It doesn't work well with the way we have things set up with the different departments coming before the liaison committees. It doesn't provide the structure that we should be getting to actually voting on the budget. To me, it should be, at the end of it is, more of a formal vote versus a argumentative vote. So I'm okay with keeping the 5 scenarios in here for right now, but I would like to, hopefully at that June meeting, provide direction to staff about the majority of the board where we're going, and even if that is 2 scenarios, like, for instance, let's just say Larry says to me, I am not taking new growth, I am not taking CPI, but John says to me, hey, I'm okay with new growth, but I'm not okay with CPI, but somehow get a majority of where the board's at. And maybe and again, I'm hypothesizing, but maybe the majority of the board says, we're okay with taking new growth. Great, we can build that into a budget. You know, I don't know if I'm willing to take any CPI because I want to see numbers before I commit to saying I'm willing to take anything out of CPI. And then, similar to what we've done in the past, we can build in the new growth, that's fine. And then we can build in different scenarios with the CPI based on, it's less, so we're gonna have not as much money to play with as we have, but we can say, hey, listen, if you're willing to take X amount dollars of CPI, this is how we would be spending that. This is where it would be spent at, you know? And that, to me, is a better conversation for the full board to have, because now we're getting a recommendation from staff about where to go. We've had conflicts on the board floor when people want to cut things at the last minute, and everyone's like, well, where are we cutting it from? And then you're trying to make, well, let staff do it, let staff do it. Well, that's not, we're the policymakers. We should be telling staff where to cut things, not the other way around. So I'm okay with this, leaving it for right now, but I'm hoping that we can come to a more clear direction for staff at the June meeting. Does anyone, yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely 100% agree. I think that we should build something into the July statement here and this is on page 13, where it says July Finance and Audit Committee recommends performance pay adjustment for non-union employees. I think that's great. But I also think that we should be saying at that time that we're making a recommendation relative to the scenario selected, if you will, or two options. We reduce it down to two options or something like that. I think that we need to include this statement in here. Narrows the scope of options, or however you might want to phrase it.
Okay.
So would you anticipate that sometime between now and June, well, we're in the May meeting, so, this committee would be talking to different board members and then make a recommendation of what those two scenarios might be, the three, or how do you?
No, I'm envisioning it happening at the June meeting, at the full, what,
I'm interrupting you, though. My envision was maybe in June, you, me, Carrie, and Scott, kind of lay out the situation.
to the full board.
Right.
Yeah.
But maybe then it would come out into July or July finance, and maybe July full county board meeting. Then set a course. But if you think you can get it done in June, that would be great.
Here's the problem. Although Finance Committee is a good representation of the full board, it's not a majority of the full board. And my thought process is I need a majority, 10 votes of something from the full board. And I'm not asking them to vote, but what I'm asking them to do is to commit to something. You know, if I already know I'm not taking new growth in CPI, I could care less what happens to the budget, then I want to know that. I want to know what your personal feelings are, because how else do we provide direction to you guys? And to me, it goes back to the whole meetings where the committees are at and the departments come before them. Because if that's the direction, well, there's cuts that are going to have to be made, and those departments need to come to the committees with a different presentation than a fluff, hey, this is the great things we do in the department. I need to know where they feel, because they're the ones that are involved with day to day, you know, we got to cut, where are we cutting out of your department? And this goes back to the whole conversation that we've been having about, to me, what are the required services that we're offering, and what are we're doing it because we've always done it, but it's not required conversation.
I agree, 100%. That's why I think, to kind of meet what staff is talking about as well, we should have this in the calendar that Finance and Audit Committee recommends performance pay adjustment but we also review the scenarios and we recommend to the board. That would be the first part of July, right? The very first meeting of this committee in July, and then we pass it to the board. We have a full discussion in July at that point, and then it follows with the standing committee public hearings based upon that approach. And then preliminary budget is presented based upon that approach. So I think that that's where it fits in nicely into the overall calendar. Now, if you think that that needs to be in June, that's fine. We can do that in June, if you will, and then we could do the pay adjustments for non-union employees in July. But it just seems to me that that's where the calendar
Well, I think
approach
it's,
fits.
if we get direction, if the board gives staff direction in June, that's gonna kind of dictate itself, right? Because last year we had, and I'm trying to remember that, 1.8 million in additional personnel costs. I'm going from memory here. Was it about 1.8 million in additional?
That was approved through resolution
Huh?
throughout the year?
No, just increase
Oh.
in staffing costs.
That seems a little high. The non-union wage increase is about $500,000.
With the state's attorney.
Yeah, but those were approved earlier in the year.
All right, well, whatever it was, I guess my point is that's gonna kind of dictate a path, right? Because we are a service organization, so commodities are a smaller portion of our overall labor costs, so, you know.
So I'm being a bit dense. So how are we going to, what is the plan then at the May cow to start to get people thinking about this? So we have some sense in June where people want to be.
What's the May cow?
The cow meeting,
Committee.
community hall meeting in May.
Oh,
Is there going to be a presentation or, because we weren't talking about doing anything in
Honestly,
June, which would push us into July.
this is some of the discussion that I was gonna have with Mike after this meeting. Mike
Too
is-
bad.
yeah, we're having it
Mike and Carrie and I are scheduled to meet after this meeting. This is kind of what I want to flush out. I have sort of an outline for June, but I want to make sure it was consistent with where the chairman wanted to go. You know, we can do, our department heads have been asked at 2 department head meetings in a row to get us their known significant supplemental requests by the end of business before Memorial Day. So we'll know that shortly. And I got a few yesterday from the sheriff's office. So we're starting to get a sense of what some of the new needs might be. We haven't yet landed. I know Suzanne is here and it's on my list of things to do. You know, what is a non-union wage increase going to be next year? We don't know that yet. We can plug in 3.5. That's what it was last year. But we can start to put all those things together. And so when we get, my thought was when we get to June is that if we do this, if we do this, if we do this, here's the hole we need to fill.
I guess to answer your question, John, I can preface the June meeting by saying something in May at the committee, next week at the committee of the whole, and be like, hey, this is the vision about what we're doing, this is what the meeting's for, come prepared with your thoughts on it, you know, and kind of, you know, lay the groundwork for what the expectation is. I think that's probably a good idea. I wasn't planning on doing it, but hey, I'm happy to do it. So I think, and then because we don't have a date set yet, right, do we?
Have a what?
Do we have a date set yet for June, for when this is?
It's at the cow meeting, I thought.
Oh, we're doing it at the cow? It's not a special meeting?
That was my thought. I think,
So we're gonna have a long cow then?
yeah, I mean, if you wanted to do otherwise, we need to talk about that and pick a date.
I think doing it at the cow is fine.
Okay,
It's an extra hour, it's an extra hour or two.
They know.
Don't plan anything in the morning.
yeah.
Another thing to announce in May, it's going to be a long cow meeting.
Y'all come prepared, okay.
Kind of point of order here, we're talking about the policy here, right? And so what we're trying to do is to approve this process,
Correct.
correct? So what I'm hearing is that we simply need to add a line into this calendar that's here for the budget development process that we're approving today for recommendation to the board, right? And so we put that in. If you want that to be in June, if that works best for staff and the calendar, then I think that's what we put in here. But we need to, as you have said, we need to narrow those scenarios a little bit. We need to start thinking about what they are, and we need to get direction from this committee, direction from the board, what we want to do. So that needs to be added in here in June then.
Okay.
That would be your logical discussion with the board, is just to make sure that they're familiar with this calendar.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yep.
And then I also want to say that I think someplace up in the area where it's talking about 20, this is on page 11 and 12, where it talks about temporary positions and talks about supplemental requests and sick leave and all that. Right in there someplace, there should be a paragraph in my mind, and y'all can tell me I'm absolutely crazy, but I think that's where we insert a paragraph that twice a year staff should plan for changes to classifications.
I question that in that I believe it's our salary administration policy that right now says that we won't do any adjustments in the 11th and 12th months of fiscal year. So that's where we already are touching on when you can and can't do it. So if we wanted to add something, that might be a different place to do it. That's,
You mean it doesn't fit into this policy, it fits into another policy, is that what you're saying?
I'm thinking it does,
Yeah.
yeah. This is the budget policy, and that's, the salary
Well, but
administration policy is more about when and how adjustments are made, how big they are,
I understand.
who has the authority to do them, what needs to be approved by the board.
Understand, but don't you think that those classification changes impacts the budget?
Just won't argue that.
Okay, so doesn't it belong someplace in here too? Shouldn't the two be coordinated?
I mean, there's reference in here about the salary administration policy, about the vacant positions, but.
Well,
I just want to bring some consistency to this and some forethought to this. Don't get me wrong, I trust administration. I know that you're doing what is in the best interest of the body and the county. I understand all that. And if you want to keep doing this way, that's fine, but man, it just seems to me like we ought to have some guidelines there. So I'd like to see it, and if it needs to be in the other policy, I think it just needs to be consistent with this policy. So I would bring the two together and make a similar statement.
Look at that.
I think, but there are adjustments that can be made that are cost neutral to the budget. So that,
We talk about, I mean, here's a perfect example. We talk about supplemental requests. It's kind of, in a way, edgy way, but it's a request, right? For something different outside. That's supplemental too. It just seems like it fits here somewhere. I'd like to hear you all tell me that I'm crazy. That's good. That's fine.
nah. All right, so do you want to, so we have the current budget policy as far as a motion. Do you want to modify that motion to add the language you were talking about, or do you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so,
Those two places.
okay, can you,
Calendar.
just for Kathy's purpose, can you recite what you would like added?
Oh, sure, why not? I'm doing this off the top of my head. Larry, help me script this.
I don't think so.
But I think maybe after between 24 and 25, 26, wherever the staff believes it needs to go. But we should have personal classification reviews or considerations. Reclassification, reconsider,
Okay,
considerations. And it would say simply something to the fact that reclassifications should come before the board twice annually. And I'm just gonna say, let's see. And I'm doing this off the top, but
April 1 and July 1.
I like it, thank you.
What was that?
April 1 and July 1.
Try and pull them together.
Yep, I like it.
Okay. And then that's one. What's your other one?
Second one is,
In the budget development process,
yeah,
letter
on
C.
page 13.
Yep.
Right. And if you want to put it in where the June, August is, Finance and Audit Committee considers and recommends.
I think it should just be its own line item up in
Two
the,
scenarios. I agree, it
yeah.
should be its own line item.
yeah,
Yeah.
up underneath the second, it should be a new second one. County Board approves current budget policy, then a next new one that we will have a committee of the whole meeting to discuss budget scenarios and a direction for staff on budget creation or something along those lines.
Was that at the top of that chart, you mean?
The second one down from the first, create a new second one. So we approve the budget policy and then this would happen right after that.
About preliminary budget presentation and scenario recommendations.
Like it.
Good job, Carrie.
Thank you. And then for the other one, I was gonna do position reclass requests should be considered by the board in April and July. Do you want only?
Sounds
That's
wonderful.
strong. Only is strong.
I envision things where something can there are gonna be times in.
Majority maybe?
That's the same with supplementals. I mean, there are times when it just kind of, has to be considered. I'm fine with it.
So that you're okay with that? Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, then,
Okay,
so you're not doing only, you're saying,
How about majority of position reclasses?
Yeah.
Okay.
all right. So, Kathy, you get that?
Carrie will email me exactly what she wants me to do.
Beautiful. Okay. So Brian made a motion to add those two things to the budget policy. Is there a second for that? John seconds. All those in favor of those two modifications say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So we have a modified budget policy. Is there any more discussion about that?
Not that, but I have something else I'd like.
Oh, okay, what else?
Number 27, vehicle replacement. Intended use, completed, let's see. Something about paying mileage to county officials instead of buying them a car. And is that something we do? Or if it's cheaper to pay them mileage than give them a car, is that something we do or don't do? Number 27, vehicle replacement.
We do pay mileage. I'm not sure if it's,
I can
if it's,
speak a little bit to that.
okay.
Several years ago, we used to have a lot of more take-home vehicles for department heads, and we've actually gone away from that. I remember early in my career with the county, I put together an analysis of those department heads that had take-home vehicles for, it was a committee request, and as those vehicles went away, we kind of abandoned that process, which I think is in alignment with this paragraph. So rather than a department head getting a car, if they have to go somewhere, they use a county car or they get mileage.
Okay.
So
Before replacement of any county vehicle, evaluation of intended use and purchase first paying mileage. I just, if it's not something we're doing, I'm wondering why it's there.
It's dated,
I don't want to make it, it's not a big deal to me, it's not hurting anything, but maybe it's something to be looked at in the future. Because it just doesn't, it's not something we're doing.
Well, I think they are still doing it. That's what I just heard Scott say.
Some still do it.
But I read this paragraph, it balances purchasing a car against seeing how much it costs to pay the guy to drive his own car.
Correct. I would agree.
Okay,
But you don't think that's how it should happen?
I don't know that it is happening.
I think,
not just on, it's not just that math, but we do, in fact, it was maybe a month ago, Scott and Carrie and I sat with the health department and Rob Richardson in our garage and kind of looked at the fleet and, you know, how many health department vehicles are there really? You know, they want 7, we can go with 5, those kinds of, that's the kind of math that we're doing, you know, and they're gonna get 5 this year. They wanted more. You know, I think we were kind of able to identify it. When I say we, it's really Rob, our chief mechanic, but he knows how many miles are getting put on cars and you know, who's operating on a kind of a true fleet mentality where everyone doesn't get the same car every day. It's not my car, you know, versus in some offices are doing a better job of that than others. So I do feel comfortable that we're keeping an eye on things, but it's not as hard and fast as it's written here. I will attest to that.
Okay, I just read the paragraph as comparing to buying somebody a car and how much does it cost to just pay their mileage compared to buying a car. And I don't, even that scenario that you just said doesn't fit this for what I'm seeing here. I don't have a better way to put it, so we'll just leave it at that today.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is this seems to be designed for a particular person who was given a vehicle.
And it's more
24
reflective
hours
of
a day,
what
7
Scott
days a week.
articulated.
No, that's not really, John. What I read it is, you know, either you get the vehicle or it's cheaper just to give you mileage, so use your own vehicle. And I don't know that we have somebody using their own vehicle and paying mileage. Maybe an administrator, I don't know how that works exactly, but so.
Can
Go ahead, no.
Yeah, well, because I understand, I'm catching what you're saying, and so, but it says here, the way I'm kind of reading it is, before we do a replacement of any county vehicle, we go back and we evaluate whether or not they get one, or we pay a mileage, and that, you know, you complete some kind of review to make sure you're not just replacing the vehicle, and then if you are replacing a vehicle, you look for possibly something that's not, you know, maybe it's pre-owned rather than new. I mean, it looks like there's steps that you're taking.
That is a better description of reality, is that we do meet at more than once a year to review the fleet, you know, what has been requested, what is really identified as needed, what it's going to cost, the timeline for the orders, the utilization of vehicles. That we do. Maybe we could write some text that better reflects that. I do think this text reflects more of what Scott articulated a decade ago, where we had more take-home vehicles and we were kind of challenging ourselves, is that really what we want? You know, we used to have a deputy director of EMA who took a vehicle home. You know, county engineer used to always take a vehicle home. The state's attorney always took a vehicle home. That's not happening anymore.
And those are the county officials you're referring to? Okay.
Okay, I think,
Okay.
but I don't have a good way to replace that right now, Peter, but it just seems like the language is a little out of tune with the way I read it.
Would the committee like us to refresh that sentence?
Sure, if you want, I mean.
We're refreshing this to the web.
Sure.
I think we can put something better in there.
Put some more lipstick on it, as the expression goes. Okay. Is there anything else? Okay, we'll go to vote then. On item 7.6, Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries. All right, we're on to item 7.7. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Larry and John. Larry, you pulled this one.
Yeah, let me bring it up here for a second. It has to do with the exemption software. And a year or two ago, I lose track, we were talking about getting some software to track exemptions.
Morning, Alex.
Yeah, morning. Just wondering, is this sort of the same thing, or it sounds like it's new and different?
No, this is different. That software is in place and being used.
Okay,
and
so
the
we can track
results-
that somebody isn't taking the homestead exemption in 2
Correct.
states, et cetera.
Correct. Now,
Okay.
through review, it doesn't seem to be, we seem to be doing okay. You know, prior to this, getting the software, everything seems to be matching up pretty well with what we're seeing in terms of the number of exemptions that we're giving out, and we don't really see an extraordinary amount of things that are off. When people think that they're off, there's normally an explanation for it.
Okay, so that software is up and running and if it's something that we're seeing that you're taking care of it in office, we might possibly not renew that.
There is a possibility. Right now, it seems like it's pretty much confirming that we're doing a good job. At least it feels like it, from everything that we got, and the numbers. If you were to say, give me numbers on erroneous exemptions given out, it'd be difficult for me to do that because I don't see any out there. I mean, and especially if you want me to compare it to what had happened prior. All right, it looks like it's consistent. We're seeing a lot of good things. When people report an erroneous exemption, there's normally that person, they're not entitled to it. In the meantime, they are entitled to it because that new exemption doesn't fall off till the following year. So there's a lot of misunderstanding as to what happens in those situations.
But this is just, so I'm clear, this is new software, so somebody can fill in the blank and go online and do their request for an exemption?
Well, it will be. Here's why I'm here this morning, because I want to clarify a couple things, because I think there's two things in this resolution that need to be tweaked. All right. We entered a contract with a company called Just Appraised to do our deed software. If you take a look at the second from the bottom, the second B, be it further resolved in the McHenry County Board hereby authorizes the assessment office to purchase a subscription amount not to exceed $54,000. All right. This has been a 1.5-year long process. Right now, they got the software that we needed up and running, and I need that first year subscription paid for. All right. I thought it was part of the budget. And one of the reasons that I'm here is because they said, well, no, you don't have a resolution. Well, it was part of our budget. So we didn't think we needed a resolution at this point. So I just need to make sure that that invoice that we got is authorized for payment because they finally got it up and running for us. And now obviously they're expecting to work on that and to get paid for it. So that's why I'm here. And again, I didn't think that we needed a resolution. I was told we weren't needing a resolution because it was part of the budget process. So I need that invoice.
Last year's budget process or this year's?
The 25. Yeah, there's a line item where that this software was part of that.
So the initial implementation, I think you guys got a discount or something.
We did. So there was also, to complicate things, there was a delay on top of that.
Well, it was $8,500, which we fit into the budget, but it didn't need a resolution because of the value. But then this amount is in the budget, but since it's over the $30,000 for the purchasing ordinance, it needs a resolution. So it needs both budget and.
Okay.
Because of the dollar.
Right. So I'm glad you brought this up because I do need to tweak this because again, the exemption thing is not something that we entered in. The deed application software is. So, and that's what we need to make sure is addressed and paid for.
So would you like in the 1, 2, 3, whereas exemption taken out?
Yes, where the exemption stuff is taken out. So I would like to get authorization so that we could pay the bill to modify this to remove the exemption part. And then because the deed application process is what we used and utilized and went into a contract with through the budgeting process.
And does the 54,000 have anything to do with the exemption or just strictly the deed?
It's just a deed. It's just a deed.
Okay.
So and
that's
again, and we
one.
actually got that knocked down to, I think, 30 or 40,000 because of the pilot program. There was a huge delay last year. We were supposed to get a year free. And because of the delay in extra security that we wanted to make sure we had, there was delay. Then we finally got it up and running. We got a 3-year pilot for, instead of this 54,000, it's now that reduced amount of, I think 40,000.
Okay, so that's one thing. What was the other thing?
That's it.
That's it?
That's
Okay.
it. So that's what I need authorization to make sure that gets paid.
Okay, well, okay, so let's deal with first things first. Let's deal with the resolution.
Perfect.
And I'll make a motion to remove exemption out of the resolution. I think it's only in the one spot. If
It's whereas exemptions in deed software.
Yeah, so just
and
that
then
in the
purchase
third
of
whereas.
And fourth.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll make a motion to remove that from the resolution. Is there a second?
And, well, are you gonna modify the whole thing or just each piece? Because you also said it was a very different amount of money. said it was-
It was not to exceed 54,000 and the amount is less than that. So to me, this.
You
still
can just
covers it.
leave that, that's
the
fine.
con- That's in the contract.
Yes.
That's in the
right,
contract,
yes,
okay.
So it's a lower
With
amount.
optional annual renewals, okay.
So your motion is to approve eliminating totally that third whereas.
No, my motion is to remove in the third whereas and the fourth whereas, the word exception. Exemption, sorry.
Exemption.
Yes,
An electronic exemption
Uh,
fourth.
yeah.
And Mike, in the, therefore be resolved.
Yeah, now be it resolved, I think that should
Oh,
be
you're right,
as
it's,
well.
it's down there too. So remove the exemption from anywheres in this resolution.
Correct, perfect, that works.
Okay. Okay, is there a second to that? Okay, Carolyn seconds that.
This is a motion to approve with that change, right, altogether? So
I'm
we're
just-
approving the resolution or is this
No.
amendment?
Just amending it,
Okay.
okay? All right, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's passed. We have an amended resolution with that taken out. Larry, do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Was there any other questions by anyone else? All right, we'll go to vote then on the amended resolution. Did you have anything else you want?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right, Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item 7-8. I'll entertain a motion. Larry, or Brian? Larry seconds.
Sure.
Larry, you pulled this one?
Yeah, just wondering why for something like this, we only had one bid.
I'm just getting to it, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Why do we only have one bid for the promotional?
Oh, they've been using this, that they were already here, or they want to continue with them?
Who wanted to continue with them?
HR?
Okay. I guess I don't have a problem with that, other than, wouldn't it be policy to put it out for bid, or do they just get to say that that's what they want to do?
No, this, it's not a, it's kind of a fine line between professional services and other stuff. We allowed it to go just without a bid.
Okay, because it's a very unique,
Yeah,
Company
it's
kind of
it's
thing?
unique, it's specialized testing for different levels of the police force.
okay. Personally, I feel that it's something that could have been out to bid and probably should in the future.
Sounds good?
I'll leave it at
Yeah, I
that.
agree with Larry, but the question I have is, do you feel that this is a competitive price?
I do.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need.
Okay, anything else? Okay, go to vote then. John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries. We're on to item 7-9. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Larry? John? Carolyn?
Yep, yes.
You pulled this.
Oh, yes, I'm hearing everybody else say yes. Okay, and it really, I mean, I think we're a government.
You had a question about the numbers?
I did.
So we got the quote a while ago, and we currently have an existing contract with DLS. And so the full 5 years is the $68,398. However, the $6,839 is the remainder of fiscal year 2025. And so based on when the resolution's gonna pass and when we can start with this, get this upgraded, it'll only be 6 months.
That's why it doesn't go to the full 68,000.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 1139.97 a month. And so I just rounded it up to the 1140, minus the cents. So that's where the 6839 is for 6 months. So June through November.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to vote then. Carolyn?
Yes.
Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries. We're on to item 7-13. I'll entertain a motion. John?
Second.
Larry? John, you pulled this?
My question is the same for 13 and 14, basically. This is about $500,000 in grant money from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a plan if the money gets pulled? Because it's substantial, and there's salaries and wages tied to it and everything else. So do we know if there's?
I can have them reach out to you, I don't know I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. I'm assuming without this money, the program would be in a bit of trouble based on.
Well, this is the fund that the board has considered in the past when there's shortfalls. The general fund covers it, but I don't know to this size what their plan is. You know, I can go back and look, positions were created, I think in July, to see the language in the resolution. If it says if the grant goes away, then the position goes away.
Well, that's policy. Policy states that if the grant goes away, the position goes away. Wait, what? I'm serious, that's what it
It's not always written
says.
that way in the resolutions.
Well, whether it's in a resolution or not, that's our policy. We went down that road before.
Oh,
Okay. All right.
So I guess whether the actual resolution says that or not, that's the county policy. So it should be inherent that that's what happens.
So can I ask for clarification? Are you saying because if we pass this, then we're saying that we're gonna commit to it? And that's why the resolution would commit it to us, even though the policy would say if the grant goes away, this goes away? I'm just wondering what you mean, because you're saying, you were saying it was in the resolution that,
This, I think it was July, there was a couple different ones, a couple different grants establishing a position for this grant, positions.
I'm concerned moving forward with the inability to predict right now what's going to happen or not going to happen. That we're committing these funds and the funds may not materialize in the future. And then, you know, so my question on these is going to be anytime we see a grant is, what's the backup plan? Or has anybody thought about a backup plan if that money doesn't happen?
I think that's a valid question that we have to get an answer to.
Yeah, because it's substantial.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think we all know right now that there's a huge risk with these grants across the board from the federal level. And so I don't think, however, we need to just take a knee-jerk reaction and just say, okay, we're not going to proceed with our planned programming. So I am in favor of moving forward with both of these resolutions. But I agree wholeheartedly that there is an underlying policy of the county that if in fact grant funds dissipate, they go away, then those positions associated with those specific grants equally go away. And so I think that's the case, and I don't think that by passing these resolutions that we're putting ourselves in jeopardy of that.
No, and I'm for these, okay? My question is, should we be asking, you know, I think we should be asking the question, especially on large grants, what happens if it doesn't happen?
Yeah, I understand.
Because that's gonna, you know, that we're gonna be the ones trying to answer that question.
And that's going to be across the board for all federal grants, all federal funds, period.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, and my concern is that, especially now we're going into the budget process, you know, you could land up with tons of supplemental saying we need money from the general fund to cover this. And then we have another problem on our hands.
Yeah, well, and again, that would be a board decision, right?
Right.
I mean, they could theoretically come back and say the grant got pulled, but we feel that this is valuable enough that the county should fund it. The board make a decision.
Yeah.
There are those situations, I guess, not unlike some of what we talked about, the respiratory grant that was pulled. There are times we use grants to pay for things we're going to have to do anyways. I don't think that's necessarily reflective of here, but there are those situations.
Sure.
But forcing us staff to come back to the board and say, the grant has gone away, the grant has been cut in half, we're gonna need more money. Do you agree with us that this is something we have to keep doing? Because I think that's healthy.
Right.
I agree.
No, I agree. I'm just thinking that I think it's important that department heads be thinking about, if I'm getting a huge amount of money to fund a program, that goes away. And then I have to go to the board to ask for money, and how do I do, what's my process gonna be, and how do I do that, what do I need to be thinking about, especially if jobs are involved. And our policy is those jobs go away, if there's no grant money, how do they balance those two things? It's an important program, but you need those three people. You know,
Yeah,
those are all
no,
the things, you know, I think they need to be thinking about that in their minds.
This is a good time to kind of reiterate that policy.
Yes.
And just make sure that everybody's on the same page, that we all understand that this reality in the departments, they're receiving grants. But I think they do. I mean, I'm confident they do. I think your point is well taken.
Carrie, can I ask a kind of a logistic question? So in the accounting software, is there anything that would red flag that? So like if there isn't a revenue stream coming in to support a grant anymore, is there anything that pops up that would then say these expenses are tied to that grant and therefore, you know, there has to be a wind down, right? Like, so there has to be like, you know, X amount of weeks of grant went away, okay, fine, we're winding this down. So we would be covering that in the short term, but like really short term, but like, is there anything in D365 that kind of, you can put like a block on it type thing?
You can add a funding limit to projects in D365, and that's actually the only hard stop in the project module. So if it reaches the funding limit, it stops it. Like if you have the project assigned to it.
But what happens if the revenue stream goes away?
I mean, we don't have, I mean, we could set these grants up that way, so it would stop it. But I think they would be notified, they would know before the D365 told. And we do identify revenue and expense by the project, so we can see the shortfall.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'm trying to think of a way that ultimately staff meet, for you to try and remember every single grant and who's it tied to what grant, and or if it's not grant, I mean, that's not realistic. So I'm trying to think of, allow the computer some way to be able to notify you and say, hey, this was a grant funded position that is no longer being funded.
The way it's typically set up is you would put the funding limit in for the full grant award. So I
Right.
guess we'd have to think about changing that to notify us if it runs out. But right now, it's out, that's done outside of the system. I guess changing grant amounts.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was some way we could make that more easier.
We know other grants.
Yeah, right.
Well, just curiosity question. So if I'm somebody funded by a grant, payroll just goes along and processes every pay period, regardless if they're funded by a grant or funded by the general fund, right? I mean, so
We do
but-
have the grant funded positions identified in Kronos.
oh, okay.
But again, it's.
But the money's all coming from one,
It's
like-
tracking more so than it is like red flagging and stuff.
okay, so,
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to.
yeah, right, the short term, yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on 713?
So that was all I had for 714 as well.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to bundle them back together.
I don't remember who made the motion in second.
Collins and Smith.
Okay. Will you guys be willing to modify it for 13 and 14?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we have, the motion then is for approving items 713 and 714 at the same time. Any more discussion on either? If not, we'll vote then. Larry?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay. That takes care of our consent agenda. We are on to advance.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I have mental health presentation.
Why not? It was on the,
Is that,
it was on the agenda today.
I'm not seeing it here. Well, now would be the right time.
You asked Tiana to take a name off of that. I'm guessing she took the entire thing off instead, is what happened.
Yep.
Okay.
We had under number 8 presentations, I know we're the mental health board, and we had Connie Machine's name on there, and I asked her to take the name off.
Right.
So I'm gonna assume she took the entire thing off.
Okay, well, hey, let's do it. We okay with doing the presentation? Okay,
This is information only. right?
yes, correct. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Hi, I'm Lindsay Keisman. I am the treasurer from the Mental Health Board. I think I know almost everybody here. And I brought with me our Fiscal Operations Manager, Melanie Duran. Connie Machini, our board president, couldn't be here today due to a hip replacement surgery. So she sends her best to all of you. And I want to start off just by inviting all of you to our town hall this evening. It is from 5 to 7 p.m. Where we bring in community stakeholders to inform what we do. So if you don't already have something going on this evening, we welcome you there. I want to thank Mr. Scalo. We talked more than a year ago, I think, about having a presentation at finance just to increase sort of your awareness of how we do our finance side of things at the Mental Health Board. And I will walk you through those handouts because they're
Is there just one page?
just one page.
Okay, so,
Okay.
yes.
Yep.
Did you get one?
No, we got them over here,
Double-sided,
so. you
it's
can-
double-sided, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
All right.
So, over time, there's been, questions about how the Mental Health Board does its allocation process, how our fund balance utilization process works, and obviously with the change from property tax to sales tax, what are we doing right now, and what are we forecasting? So today I'm hoping to talk about all of those things and to make mention of a few additional things that come up as questions. So the thing I wanted to start with is that also last year, the Community Mental Health Act had some changes made to it, and we have been working with county administration on just back-end processes. I know some of that was addressed earlier, I think in your 7.1 on the consent agenda. So as our board makes approvals to move funds around or make decisions, that's another thing I'd like to talk about today because it changes sort of the relationship that we have had to something slightly different moving forward. So I wanted to start off with our fund balance. There's a couple of questions that come up with our fund balance. I'll start with, in property taxes, we had a 5-month fund balance reserve policy. We had to do that under the property tax model. And I want you to know that our board has made adjustments to our fund balance reserve policy down to a 3-month model, which is a better use of our dollars because there's only really a 3-month delay with our sales tax migration. And as we've been working on what are we going to do because the sales tax dollars are not the same as what the property tax dollars are, one of those decisions was move to the 3-month fund balance so that we could release some of those funds and use those directly to client services over the next couple of years. We will be looking at that year over year just to ensure that that does in fact cover us and that we might not want to move it back to a 4-month or something, but right now we're using a 3-month fund balance policy. It becomes relevant as we had worked with Carrie months back on a forecasting tool for how we are going to ensure that we hopefully don't have a reduction in services. With the sales tax dollars being slightly less than property tax dollars, our goal had been to make sure that we're not going to reduce services in the community. While we all had hoped we would be able to increase services in the community, where we are today is where we are. So one of the things I wanted to bring up with that, and I showed you this document, which is our timeline. We often are on a completely different timeline than you all. So if you're kind of seeing what we're doing, we have our budget timeline, which is actually happening right now. Our board will approve this within the next month. So we are setting our budget and starting that process in the first quarter of the year. And part of that is because as we set our budget, that determines the budget that we're putting forth in client services for agencies to put in applications. So you'll see that we do our drafts, our approval budgets, and then we go ahead and submit that to county. And with the sales tax, it's now we get what we get. There used to be back and forth with this board and different people on setting what it would have been with property tax, and that's been completely eliminated. So, but we do, go through the steps of, meeting with county admin, and we typically do a presentation to your public health committee as well. So that's our budget timeline. We also have an allocation timeline. So allocations are, we take our, the number of dollars that were budgeted for client services in the fiscal year, and we approve that, and we open that up for applications, typically in the summer months. We review all of the applicants. We do the awards typically in September, October timeframe, and then everybody gets their funding allocations going into December 1 start date. Along the way, we audit, and I want to talk about fund balance because one of the questions we get is, why isn't your budget consistent? Why do you always have money going back into your fund balance every year? And we do, and we'll never have a year where money doesn't go back into fund balance. The reason for that is if we give agencies the money that we give throughout the year, we're doing auditing to ensure that they are providing the services that they're providing. And things happen, right? Let's say we did a purchase of position and somebody resigns from their job. We're gonna pull those funds back, right? So, and if they can't, reuse them, it ends up going back into our fund balance unless we have a process for giving it back to somebody in need. The Mental Health Board has a mid-year allocation process. So that we do audits from all of Q1 and up to our mid-year allocation to say, what are the unused dollars so that even within the same fiscal year, if we've got $60,000, $300,000 that for whatever reason didn't get utilized, that we're trying to figure out who the high utilizers are. So an example would be we give a fee-for-service contract to a psychiatric provider. It's less than they asked for, but we didn't have it to give, right? If somebody else didn't use that money, they can apply mid-year and say, hey, we've been utilizing above what we think where we're at, and we may make a decision to then take those same dollars, reallocate them to that person within the fiscal year, attempting to be good stewards of the money and reducing how much continues to go back into fund balance, and serving people today who are in need as soon as possible. So that's a little bit of our allocation timeline, and I know people have had questions about, how that works, why we're doing that. Historically, about 2 years ago, we had a new executive director come in, and we used to just let that fund balance kind of roll over year to year. We're really not trying to do that anymore. It becomes particularly important as what we are doing this year. I'll step back for a second. Last year, we didn't get a lot of time as a board to make our decisions about allocations. So when we do our special meetings and everything, we were supposed to go to, our vote for allocations, and we learned about a week in advance that we were gonna have a pretty massive shortfall. So, we matched what we had done the year before for the most part in allocations. We've had more time to prepare and plan this year, so I just wanted to share some of the things that we've been doing. The other document I provided to you is the tool that Carrie actually crafted a couple of months back. And you'll see on the bottom, there's some colors, there's green and yellow. This is one of those spreadsheets that when you change the numbers, everything moves around. It's a living, breathing document. And what we wanted to do, and we've, taken our numbers and put it into this document, and we plan on using this document. And I wanted to give you guys a little bit of education around this, because this may be something we submit to you guys in the packets. What we're doing with this is projecting what we call flat funding. So in our client services row, you'll see that we haven't changed the number. There's a lot of things that we can do to gather data over the next couple of years about the sales tax. Is the sales tax revenue gonna increase, be what it is, decrease? We don't know. But if we do flat funding, because this is a question that I know a lot of people have, and interest income remains the same, the other revenue that we do remains the same, and sales tax comes in at a 3.5% increase year over year. We will, in the bottom, when you see that green turn into yellow, that's our fund balance reserve. So because of the transition from property tax to sales tax, you'll all recall that we had some months where we were still paid property tax and got sales tax. So our fund balance is actually, larger than it was, a year ago. But we will have to utilize our fund balance all the way down. And what you'll see is that the number of months of fund balance reserve, if you look into the 2031 column, and this assumes that everything is accurate, is the last year that we get as close down to that 3-month mark, right? And if projections are correct in 2032, we may actually, with sales tax increases, assuming it's that 3.5%, we may actually see our first year of slight revenue increase, which what that means is, as from our finance perspective, is that we have no reason to believe that we will be able to increase our client services probably for a good 5 years. However, if things change with sales tax, it may be different. Currently, I think the temperature on our board is to be a bit conservative. We want to gather data. We want to see what happens. And as it relates to some of what, you guys know about us, is that if there are opportunities in the future for us to coordinate, we've been having great conversations with administration here about ways that, we can work together. I know conversations about transportation have occurred, IGAs have occurred, and we're going to continue those conversations as far as our relationship, with you all. So the news is that we'll probably make it, is I guess the best that I can say right now. But we will not have any way to have a meaningful increase in the population that we, are serving. There's a couple things that, I like to share what we hear from funded agencies. You guys just had this conversation about, fear and worry about federal grants and state-based grants being cut. And historically, agencies would come to us in a time of need and say, hey, this got cut, we're gonna have to close down this program. Will you be able to take that on? And I don't know that we anticipate being able to help in that way. Furthermore, a long time ago, there was conversations about shifting of programs that we currently fund over to you all, which includes the 22nd Judicial Court System and some of the police social worker programs. And right now, our board is not planning on, engaging in that dialogue. We threw it out there for you all. If there's opportunities for that in the next couple of years, that would be one way to assist us in having some of that. But our board is really committed to making sure those programs don't disappear, because they're really, important. Some of the other kind of fiscal responsibilities that we've had and things that we've been able to do in the past, I'd like to just share. Usually we build into our budget a little bit of what I call buffer money every year, so that when people do come back or they are overutilizing mid-year, that we have maybe a couple $100,000 that we can allocate, mid-year and along the way to crucial services. We're really looking at reducing that down because we don't have enough space for that. So going back to fund balance and some of the change in how we move dollars around in our budget, I want to let you all know that if our board makes a decision mid-year, we are going to have to pull that from our fund balance reserve. So you may see something come across one of your committees saying that we have, asked to move dollars from point A to point B, because we won't have it built into our budget anymore for those kinds of situations. So I wanted to let you guys know that you may see more of that than we have in the past, and that it's not a sign that maybe we didn't anticipate it in our budget. It's a sign that we are trying to give every dollar that we think we can to the people in need and not just hold stuff back just because. But occasionally people come forth with emergency situations. Occasionally people come forth with I'll call it opportunity projects. For example, last year we had New Directions, which I believe you guys all funded some dollars towards a 3/4 living apartment in Woodstock. I think they got additional grant funding for that. And they had a little bit of a gap that they needed to make up in order to make the project go live. Our board decided to fill that gap so that they didn't lose a crucial opportunity. But we can't always foresee those kinds of things until it's presented to us. And in the future, we will probably have to go into our fund balance to do that. One of the things I want to point out is that even though we're, kind of flat funding across the board, the industries that we support are typically really underpaid. Human services professionals are really underpaid. It's a chronic issue that they bring to us. So this model, this template, does not account for any cost of living over the course of the next 6 or so years. So even though we think that we're going to be able to use those same dollars, there may in fact be, less services as they have to decide if those same dollars can still cover salaries as they increase year over year. Another question that comes up is our administrative budget, and every year we look through that. We've been looking through that with a fine-tooth comb. We cut things last year as we've looked into our draft budget for fiscal year 2026. We have also been trying to cut anything and everything that we can. And there are occasional questions we get about our administrative budget seeming like it's a high percentage. But I did want to make it clear that the Mental Health Board specifically employs staff that do direct services to our professionals community with training, oversight, CEUs, things like that. So those roles are kind of tucked into some of our personnel, which makes that look larger. And if you really kind of pulled them out, you would see that our administrative budget is 11 to 13%, is that right? About in the 11 to 13% range. And that includes even projects for just regular maintenance of our building that we also own as well, which every year something has to be addressed there. That's all I've got. Does anybody have any questions? I hope it was helpful in explaining kind of what we do. I'll stop there.
Huh?
I have a couple questions.
So do I, but go ahead. First, thank you very much for coming and presenting.
Yeah.
What is admin non-personal?
We have various software licenses we pay for. We have the building expenses, some staff training type things, just the normal office supplies, utilities.
So the increase for the 26 budget, potentially showing, because it's your budget
Right. That is going to be, we're looking at, this is initial draft, that number is going to be dropping. We're looking at potentially, we have very old, outdated bathrooms in the front of our building, and we have tenants with ADA issues and so forth. So we're looking into doing a bathroom remodel project that's an ADA compliant issue. We're also seeking grant funding for that, so we're hoping we won't be using any.
Okay, so that capital dollars are
Right,
in that.
it's just one capital project, and it's basically on a high range right now. We're looking more, probably about 170,000, not the 300,000 we were originally thinking. But we are seeking grant funds, and it's not a set thing that we're even doing that project yet. It's just something we're exploring right now.
Okay.
But that would be a one-time thing that would go away in the future.
Yeah, that's why I was asking about that,
Yeah.
up and down like that. So that's capital dollars. Okay, that was it.
Other members? Brian?
First off, two things. Thank you so much for a very, very thorough and informative report. So I'm grateful. Fantastic job, and I want to commend you for that, Lindsay. Second thing is that I know that, Mental Health Board has been in some challenging circumstances over the last year and a half now, and so I commend you all. I think that you are doing a fantastic job in terms of maintaining services and moving things forward to the best of your ability, and the board needs to be commended as well on that. But I thank you and truly commend you. My question is, in terms of the budget, and I should probably know this, but in terms of the budget, what's the total amount of county court program support that you are providing?
Around 600.
I don't know the exact number offhand, but it's about $600,000.
$600,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you didn't support that at that level right now, that would provide you with $600,000. I mean, those programs are very important, so I don't want to see those lost. But
Correct.
that $600,000 then would be able to go back into your services.
Right, we would support other services, correct.
Yes, anything that's taken off the table will go right back into client services.
Right.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, and others may want me to keep my mouth shut, but just out of curiosity, are there other program support areas with the county right now that you all are providing above and beyond these court program support services?
There are some agencies that we fund that work in collaboration with your public health department. But those are more out of our opioid settlement fund dollars.
What about the social worker program?
That's include, I'm sorry, that
That's included in the
600,000 would be included in.
I'm sorry, okay, good.
It's about 300 for social workers, 300 for.
Correct.
other
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, so we definitely work with agencies who have received your ARPA funding over the last couple of years for parts of what they do. But keeping in mind, I always like to repeat this, we don't fund agencies, we fund programs within agencies. So some of the agencies have relationships with funding from you all that isn't necessarily related to the program that we fund though. The opioid settlement dollars is just a completely separate pool of funds that I didn't talk about. I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like. But the presentation today was about our sales tax fund. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just truly commend you all. I know that's been difficult, but thank you.
Thank you.
Other members?
No, other than the thank you part.
Go ahead, Karen.
So on the projected month reserve, you say and it's not until 31 that you get to 3 months?
No, let me explain that. So if you look at the colored line where it goes from green to yellow, so it's actually in 2029 where it starts to go yellow that we dip below a 4-month reserve, but we're not dipping below the 3-month reserve. So in this model, we don't dip between our below our 3-month reserve. Now, I can tell you that, the unknowns that we are looking at is, will we get that 3.5% increase year over year? There are other things, for interest, like our interest income column, you'll see that we did a -5 there. And part of that is because, as we keep reducing our pool of money, the amount of interest income we get will be smaller because we have less money in that account. And that also assumes that interest rates remain, consistent, which could change over, the next couple of years. So those are some areas we're looking at. And then, as I said before, we have been looking kind of with a fine-tooth comb, over our personnel and non-personnel admin budget as well. But a lot of those cuts were actually kind of already made in FY25. We took a lot of, anywhere we could, we trimmed in 2025, so.
Okay, and so you had just mentioned that you get to the 3 months in 2031, but you're saying the yellow just says now you've dipped below that 4 months.
Yeah, what I wanted to point out is that if you look at this forecasting tool, so we kind of bottom out in 2031, and you'll see that that 3.56 moves up to 3.91. So that's indicative that our FY32 year might be the first year we would actually kind of
Start back up again.
we would have caught up to where we were at with property taxes, sort of, because really we had to use 2 months of those reserves that we previously had just to get to this model. So
Plus the overlap. Plus the
overlap funds, yeah.
Property tax overlap, okay.
Yeah, the overlap funds are, they were a good gift to receive given what happened. It's a big part of what's going to allow us to sustain the flat funding and hopefully no cuts. And once again, this is a living, breathing document. Our anticipation is that as we get a full year of data, that we'll be able to know, are these percentages, accurate? So, year over year, our board will make those decisions. And if it's going in a good direction, more dollars will go to client services. If it's not going in a good direction, we're going to look to cut anything that's not client services, that's reasonable first, but we're pretty trim already. So.
And so for other revenue, you've got rental and miscellaneous. So miscellaneous being like program, and there's, charge for anything in your programs, right?
Like miscellaneous revenue, we had recently eliminated our postage machine, so we had a reserve of postage, which, it was expense in the past, so it now goes under miscellaneous revenue. So it's just the weird quirky things like a workers' comp refund or, it's not so much that we have a revenue source other than the building, it's just more the weird little things that kind of come in and.
And that 1%.
Most of that's coming then from your rent.
Right, from our rent. Mm-hmm. And we're trying, part of what the philosophy of our building always was having a centralized location for human services and not-for-profits to be able to have reasonable rent and accommodations and space. So that there have been years where we have not increased, rent. So we're putting in there a 1% increase year over year on rent. And that's also something that could change. But I don't know that will move the needle too much, to be honest.
No, I mean, go to 2 and you're really bringing it in. Okay. And your fiscal year starts January 1 or is it December?
December 1.
December 1. I thought it was December 1.
Yeah,
okay.
we're in the county.
You're in the same county, right? Okay. And okay. I think that's it.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll work backwards. So Lindsay, when you talked about, possible mid-year budget expansion, I'm trying to think of what would work best between us and you. And I guess my question is, in D365, because you have your own revenue stream, which is the sales tax, so that you don't have to go through our process of approving changes. I'm trying to understand if you were to create initially, and we enter in, I'm kind of looking at both of you and Carrie at the same time, but if we were to put into the budget an additional amount that you could theoretically utilize, because it's already in the budget in D365, you wouldn't have to necessarily come before us then to have that budget modified.
I will say what this has a little bit to do with the Community Mental Health Act changes, and I think we're working that all out on the back end because, our understanding is that when our board, makes a change that really, that should be it. There's no additional approval process. So it would be handled on the back end, and I do believe that they're working on a process for how that flows for informational purposes.
Correct.
That's the new language added to the budget policy.
Correct, but I guess what I'm looking at is, so what Lindsay had said that, hey, so they have a budget, pick a number, $10 million budget, right? And they're gonna do some mid-year things that might go over that 10 million. They're gonna come back to us and say, hey, we want it to be 10.2 million or 10.3 million. And I guess my point is to try and expedite and make things simpler. If they were to come back and say, as a board, we are not gonna spend, we don't have the money to spend more than 10.5 million, mid-year or otherwise. They come back to us and we plug in 10.5 million, so that it gives you the autonomy to be able to do mid-years if you want. Worst comes to worst, you don't use the budget, right? I mean, you don't spend it. So I guess that's what I'm kind of looking towards. So it's not as cumbersome for you to have the autonomy to be able to make those decisions mid-year or any time during the year that you theoretically want.
And I'll parrot it back just to make sure I have it. So in your example, we think we're gonna need $10 million. You're saying we should set our budget at $10.5 million, and we may just never use that extra dollars to make it simpler between.
So typically, typically speaking, and I'm saying this because we don't treat our own departments that way, right? So our own departments, we lock them in, we hey, your budget is what your budget is based on what the board has said. Then if you need to go over that, you got to come back and justify that.
Right.
Because of how your revenue stream is, you're more autonomous. Yes, you're still theoretically through us, but you're more autonomous than that. And so I guess I'm not trying to set a bad precedent. I'm just trying to give you the autonomy that you theoretically have now.
I will defer to Carrie and Peter on this because I think we've started in discussions about the best way to minimize, any hurdles or whatnot, paperwork hurdles, I guess I would say. If that was the best way to do it, then we could absolutely advocate with our board that we would essentially, have reserve dollars that sit in our budget more easily with no intention to use them unless circumstance arose. If that was easier, do you foresee any issue with that?
Carrie's giving me the look what did you just open up?
I like to hear people say overinflate their budget. Like I said, I'll defer to what's best for you. I guess my comment back to that is, you should, in my opinion, you should budget for your plan, so then you're not having to ask questions like, why are you giving back budget or why are you not doing that? Because on our side, action from your board or action from this board, that's what it says in the policy, that we will change D365 based on the action of the mental health board.
Correct.
And then just let this board know, which.
It's almost like moving money from the reserve into the operating, it's just an acknowledgement, I we had a pretty good understanding on how that happened.
No, and I agree, and I 100%, but I guess my point is that if their board by action says, we know for certain we can't spend more than X dollar amount because of this, then to me, that is the number to be put in. Whether they choose to actually spend all of that or not, again, is the autonomy decision that their board is making, but it gives them that flexibility to do mid-year or more than mid-year or whatever you need to do. Because yes, it's an acknowledgement by us that they're making a decision that they want to spend more, but it also has a delay to that through our.
Not really.
No?
I mean, we can have it changed the day after their board meeting.
Their board meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I specifically put it in the policy, kind of giving us the approval to change it in D360.
I'm just trying to simplify things, but y'all come up with whatever you want. Okay, so that's one. Second is, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I know there's been discussion about going to Springfield and talking to the legislatures about what is in the bucket by which you're collecting your sales tax and expanding that slightly so that that revenue stream would be increased. Do you know where that whole discussion is or where that's at?
So I'll speak to what I know about that. Our previous executive director, I know, was in some conversations with legislators about that. We are part of a larger organization in Illinois called ACMI, which represents all community mental health boards across the state. And they pay for, lobbyists to kind of advocate. Now, across the state, that lobbying group is filled with more property tax examples than sales tax boards. So a lot of what they've been lobbying for is in that direction. And as mental health boards have become more popular, there are more township-based mental health boards than county-based mental health boards, and our need sets are really kind of different. So I know that's on the docket. I went to the ACMI conference. Our lobbyists specifically said that they were not addressing those kinds of issues in the spring legislative session. So I know it's on their radar. I know that on a state level, there's been articles shared with me about looking at sales tax as a whole and how it changes. And I know Peter modernizing sales tax. Right. There was a pretty great article on that. So reading between the lines, it would be fantastic if on a state level something influenced the sales tax model in a way that would increase the revenue that we receive from it. We're always trying to take a conservative approach because we are not an advocacy group as a mental health board, right? Like we are meant to get the dollars that we get and be good stewards of that, of those funds. I do know that our agencies, we have what we call network council, which is where every one of our funded agencies, typically a director level person, comes. And there have been communications and conversations within the agencies that they are looking to do more increased advocacy around that. And we try to keep separate from that. And we are without an executive director at this point, so I do believe that some of those direct conversations with legislators are not occurring right now as we're just trying to focus on basic day-to-day operations.
Okay.
So, can I just follow up on a question? When you said the lobbying group is not addressing it right now, do you mean both the property and the sales tax options or just the sales?
My understanding from the conference was that the focus was not on that at all, not from the lobbyist group, but from the people that they're lobbying to. So that conference, we had different, they had Lindsay LaPointe came on. We had a couple different, Illinois representatives come to that conference to speak. And as far as mental health, substance use in the IDD population, in the spring legislative session, it was my understanding they were more focused on battling with insurance companies to make sure that they had competitive rates with human service providers versus medical service providers, and that was their focus, and that they hoped that would have kind of a trickle-down effect. So, yeah, I don't know if and when that will become, but the lobbyists are talking about it, but it's not been a focus this session, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next question was, do the providers, is it a reimbursement model? Meaning they expend and then they supply you the documentation?
We pay a month behind. So they do the work for July and we pay them in August.
Okay.
They have to submit reports showing positions filled, work performed. On some of our funding, it's called fee for service, so they have to perform the services and then bill us for those services. So it is, reimbursement after the fact.
Okay. Next question. So Lindsay, you talked about moving your policy from the 5 to 3. And you one of the, I'm not saying the only reason, but one of the reasons you made that decision was because of the lag of data from the state and the actual reimbursement from the state on sales tax.
Yeah, I can talk more about that. So on the previous model with the property tax model, based on when we got revenue in, we had to have a 5-month
Right.
reserve. Sales tax is lagging by 3 months, so we know what we're going to get within that 3-month time frame. So we felt pretty safe to say we only really needed a 3-month fund reserve balance. Now, I will say that while we passed that with the caveat that we would revisit it annually, because there was on our board some concern that might be cutting it too tight. There was a lot of dialogue about only moving it down to the 4-month mark, but going back to this living, breathing document, in the 4-month mark, that green to yellow turns red real quick. I think it was in 2028,
Right.
which basically means if we commit to keeping more in our fund balance reserve, that we were going to see a cut in client services for sure. So we're hoping not to do that.
So I guess my challenge a little bit is that I understand, you're from the month that the tax is actually taken to the time that you actually get that revenue for that particular month is 3 months. But you're getting a consistent amount every month from that. So, and I think that's, and I'm going from memory here, but I want to say it's like on the low of like 800,000 to the high of 925, I think was the one, was December.
I think January was our highest, it was a little over 1, but then we dropped back down, I think it was below 8.
Okay. So again, that's just because of reporting in some places, how they report and when they report. I mean, so yeah, I get that. Okay. So I guess I'm throwing back to your board, not you specifically, but that you have a model by which you're going to consistently get a revenue chunk every single month, and even at 3 months, not that that's good or bad, but I feel like that's a very safe margin based on that you're going to get something every month. And again, that number's going to vary, but even if you were to take the minimum, once you have data from a whole year and say, hey, the lowest month was whatever, and it was at whatever dollar amount, that would be, again, a worst case scenario. So I think you're even at your 3 months, and I love and I appreciate, a living, breathing forecast, that's great. But even at the 3 months, I feel like you're in very healthy fiscal position just because of that scenario.
I think our board is, we're in a good position today. We'll be in a good position in a year. Could it be better? Of course, but we are eager to have a full year of data as well, because it's, we're doing our best to guess and we have to make those decisions. And we're all hoping it looks better. And that may change a little bit with our fund reserve policy or what that looks like, so.
Okay, my last question is for Carrie Moore. So how are we inputting the sales tax data information into the 365 portal for them as far as a revenue? Are we doing it every month based on actual data?
The treasurer enters it when they get the actual distribution from the state for all our sales tax.
Okay, so that's how that's tying up with the reimbursement model that they have then. So, I mean, yes, they have a float of whatever money is sitting in their account, but because it's being entered every single month, that flow, hopefully the inflow and outflow will theoretically match.
Yes.
Okay, so there isn't necessarily a lag, I guess is my question.
No.
Okay. All right, that was all my questions.
I just had one. I don't know if you can, or do you work with Donna Curtis in the Treasurer's Office about investments?
Yeah, sure. I'll give some history on that. So when the sales tax passed and we were under the assumption that we would have these overlap dollars, there was great interest in investing with Donna. We had her come in and do an evaluation and a presentation. And we actually made a vote to go ahead and allow our executive director to invest as, she saw fit. And then we got the news about everything changing, and so we just put a complete halt on all of that. Good news is we receive, I think, between 4.5% and 5% in our checking account that we keep our money in. So we've been, accruing good interest. There is renewed conversation now that we have a little bit better idea of if there could be smaller, shorter term investment options. But I will say that when Donna came to us, which was early last fall, late last summer, some of the investment options she gave us were actually lower yield than our checking account was at that given time. So we were, talking about having to invest in longer term options in order to yield better interest, which locks up our money longer. And now, given our circumstances here, I do not believe our board would be comfortable locking something up for 5 years given what we have here. So we've recently talked about revisiting conversations with Donna to see if shorter term, smaller amount investments would be a better yield than what we're getting. So hopefully to be determined this year, but it's on our radar.
Good. Brian?
Linda, do you have any idea what the amount of money is that you all are having to pay for the servicing of sales tax dollars?
I'm thinking of around the 30,000 payment. I'd have to check on that. Yeah.
So you were saying 30,000 on an annual basis?
No, I'd have to check. I think that's.
Is that a very small amount that's not going to move the needle too much, or is that something that is really eating away at your capacity to provide certain services?
I hadn't really looked at that, and that it's just an amount the state takes out before we get it. So without looking at the sheet, that amount comes out monthly with the payment. So I want to say it's around the, like the last payment was like $798,000, and there was like I want to say $30-some thousand charge from the state.
In that one
payment.
In that one payment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a lot of money.
400,000, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay, are there any?
I mean, there are lobbying efforts around that whole question we all suffer from. That legislative action, right? But 400,000. Okay.
Yeah, I might be off on that number.
That's all right.
Yeah, we can get you that information
That would
if
be
you want.
interesting to know, I think.
If it was 100,000.
Right.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you both for coming. I appreciate it. This was excellent. I really thank you for coming and spending some time.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we are on to 9 now.
At least she's still smiling.
She'll kick me later, but yeah, she's still smiling for now.
Well, we all reserve that option.
Yeah, I know. It's like the horse.
Okay, so I sent out the ARPA update yesterday.
Everyone was eagerly awaiting
Hopefully you don't
it.
have too many hard questions for me until Carrie gets back.
That's right. Does anyone have any questions about
I
it?
guess I will report like everything, there were a few of our external projects that there was some question about how they were running and if they were gonna finish by 26. Those have all been resolved, and Carrie did tell me before she left that she feels confident that all the external projects are on track. And she's in a lot of communication with them.
Well, I mean, it seems like they're,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what's in the pipeline, so.
Yeah, they've really started spending, so. I know.
It doesn't sound bad, but,
Issues with our cash flow.
okay. Does anyone have questions or no?
No, good.
Okay.
Just
Well-
one quick comment, I don't know if you guys noticed on the interest. Under approved projects, I did not include the $750 for the Marengo since it was a loan. But
It is a loan.
it is a loan, so I didn't put it in as a spend, because I guess it is gonna be used up for the length of the loan, but it will be coming back to us.
That is
Just
the
in
hope.
case you were tying that
That's the
number.
hope, man, that's the hope. Okay, then you are up with 12 report.
So I would just like to report that we submitted our final draft of the financial report to Baker Tilly last week. And the first review is with the manager, and she actually got that back to us relatively quick. And so there was a few minor changes. And the kind of our second draft is due today, and that's for John to review. And then after that, it will go to, I think there's a partner in Oak Brook that will be doing the final review. So we are on track, hopefully a little early based on if Baker Tilly can, speed up their timeline just a little bit. So it's going really well. It's been a process though. The accounting manager, Dodie Venisi, she did the majority of the work completing the whole report by ourselves. Hopefully no findings. It's been a pretty steep learning curve, but I would say overall the audit went very well. We had a minor issue with some cash reconciliation that took us a little bit longer to work through, but it's good. I'll be glad to have it done.
So then you can go on to other things.
We have a budget.
Yeah, right.
One thing I did want to give you, and I think it's relevant to the discussion we've been having about, do you want to?
I've got one.
Okay. So this is a draft, and we have not submitted it to Baker Tilly, but I don't imagine many of the numbers will change. What will definitely change is, I just put the total in for CDBG, we don't have it broken out by project. But I wanted to at least get you guys the first version of our total spend. So what this report is any government that receives more than $1 million in federal grants is required to file one of the single audit. And so we do the regular financial audit, and then afterwards we prepare this, and then we do the audit of this I think we're scheduled for the early July. But with all the discussion of federal grants, I wanted to at least get you the first round so you can see our total spend is about just over 25 million this year. With about half of that being ARPA. But this gives a good picture, I guess, of the money we're spending based on the grants.
Good report, thank you.
Has there been any analysis of risk?
No. I mean, I think kind of our challenge right now is the one thing I will say is outside of some of the health department grants, grants obviously by their nature are program specific. So these are supporting very specific programs. So, I guess it would move into the discussion of what are we doing that we have to do that's being reimbursed by a grant, or if we don't have to do it, do we want to continue doing it? So as far as financial risk, I mean, some of these, we talked a little the other day about the federal that's funding a whole program, if that goes away, then the program would go away unless there's funding from somewhere else.
Right, but I guess I guess I'm looking at it from more than just a financial model standpoint, in the sense that there are people that are utilizing those services that suddenly are left high and dry with no services. And,
Yes.
you know, to me, that's the risk side of it, right? Because regardless of what services they're getting, going from something to nothing is a problem.
I would agree, especially with these federal grants. They're very stringent in the projects and what you have to provide and the reporting. So I feel like they're all important or they wouldn't exist. So I don't know about, I don't, like the human side risk, not good at that.
Well, no, I'm thinking it's something that we collectively
Yeah,
should all
I
be cognizant of so that
Yes.
can we do anything about it? No, but I think we have to, and again, this is probably a bad analogy, but, you know, I kind of, you know, put it back to COVID, you know. We hadn't really thought about what was going on overseas until it started impacting us here. And I guess I would, you know, this isn't a foreign thing, this is a domestic thing, but I guess we should really start thinking about, you know, if expression shit hits the fan, we should be having plans in place to try and, you know, mitigate the impact on the people of the county.
Well, we talked about these workforce development.
Yes.
It's completely funded by the federal government.
Workforce and CDBG.
You know, $4 million. I mean, I don't think that's going away, but it does. You know, that was my point earlier today with that, those couple of resolutions. It's got to be sitting in a back burner someplace.
Well, I guess that's my point. I don't want it sitting on the back burner.
Well,
I mean, I think one of my suggestions to you in our next meeting was to kind of have on our presentation next month, kind of areas to be mindful of, you know, in terms of federal funding. You know, yes, we have already heard that CDBG is not included in the president's version of next year's budget. So that's an area that, you know, we have to keep our eye on. I don't know about workforce.
How do you feel about that, Larry?
First I heard of it.
And we're, you know, there's.
We're good for this year though, right?
What's that?
We're good for this year, what we just did.
CDBG. It's CDBG and home, right? It's not in the president's budget. Guess what? It wasn't in his budget for his first 4 years either. Obviously, Congress is different now, and how they're responding to the president is different now. So I think we have to take this very seriously. How do we respond is the question. Staff is aware. They are all very aware.
So what is that gonna do with funding to the CDBG stuff this year?
I don't think it would impact this year's.
Okay.
What are we doing, you know, if this were to come, how long is it coming? What's the phase out? Everyone in that office is federally funded.
Well, as long, you know, it's not good to not have it, but it'd be way, way worse to think we had it and we don't.
Yeah.
Well, and I think part of the challenges of that is that there has been grant money pulled that people budgeted for.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, like, District 47 just had $5 million pulled for one of their programs. So they just, they're saying they're going to continue it, but part of the program they'll be reevaluating in July to see if they're continuing next school year. So, there's been other, public health just had that money pulled, so they had to make some changes.
We got a,
so
came across a letter from Transportation Secretary Duffy on to transportation agencies. If you won't be receiving federal money if you have DEI programs, or if you're not going to support ICE. This is the kind of letter that went to IDOT. How is that going to work its way down to us? We don't know yet. We don't know yet. I know that County Engineer Kopolsky was on a call yesterday afternoon with all the Chicago area county engineers to kind of talk about this.
Plan for the best, prepare for the worst, kind of thing.
Well, and I guess that's just it. I'd rather have those discussions like, if X happens, this is how we're going to do things. And I'd rather be prepared with contingency plans than just hope that it doesn't happen. Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
I was just gonna, and partly to anticipate that a little bit without creating a lot of extra work, but I mean, understanding what those programs are doing for somebody who's not, like, other people aren't necessarily on the committees that oversee, you know, home and CDBG, but understanding what they're covering, how many people are they serving, what types of services are there, how many people would be impacted if this suddenly went away? Because it's not just, I mean, I think it's easy enough to say, okay, well, that's gonna go away, you know, the entire workforce thing goes away, but what did that mean? Because it also includes, you know, with people coming through the specialty courts and then they go through this Step Forward program, you know, it's huge. So can we kind of gather that data, like from these, I mean, not without, like I said, like a lot of extra work, but having that information available, so as we are confronted with some of this pullback, we are trying to figure out within the realm of services provided, we can kind of identify which is really more of an emergency type thing that we really feel needs to continue, or kind of a stopgap measure until we can figure something else. I don't know.
Well, I think that's why it's going to be important for department heads to be, when they go through this process, to be looking at what am I funding with grant money, and be able to prepare to answer those questions if that grant money goes away.
That would be all right from that end of it, but like CDBG, it's not a department. It's the fund, you know, it's given, one of them, for example, the township payment to do a road. So that's in his lap if he's making the plans and doing the engineering, and then all of a sudden the money's gone. CDBG is always paid in arrears too. After it's done, they get paid. So you put out, you know, $100,000 for engineering, and all of a sudden the money's not there. You know, flat out, Hebron Township don't have $100,000.
Right.
You know,
That's a good point.
it's interesting.
Well, and then the other problem is going to be too, potentially, is other agencies that we're not directly part of, you know, like McHenry, you know, McHenry County HUD and things like that, if they start getting affected, you know, the impact just becomes greater and greater. Like CBG, like you're talking about.
Well, and again, it's not like this is targeted at McHenry County. This is every single place in the United States is touched by this, so it's.
Yeah, I'm all for planning, and I appreciate the staff's diligence in these particular areas. But I also think that we practically have to understand and just acknowledge that we can't fill the gap on all these. It's just not possible.
It's not.
And we have to be realistic about it. We're probably going to be caught in some instances where we've spent money and it's not going to come, you know, but at the same time, there are things looking in the future that we'll have to say it's just not possible. You know, they can't shift. I mean, the state does this, do they not? They pass things that they put onto our shoulders, right? Well, this is kind of the opposite of that, but it's still incredibly impactful. But we have to be able to say it's not in our realm, it's not in our mission, it's not in our arena.
Well, even if it was, there's a financial limitation to what we can do. So
Exactly.
it's just.
You know, you made a comment at the strategy session that I know that probably didn't go over very well, but you know, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending, we're in a blue state, so we have there is a potential that we could be impacted more so than other. So just again, keeping all that cognizant of what's going on.
I just think we need to have the discussions,
I think,
you know?
I think the first thing we can do is determine, at least from that list, what we have to do versus what we don't have, what programs are not. Like, I know there's one on there for multi-juris, it's a $98,000 grant reimbursement, and that covers state's attorneys doing drug prosecution. So that, of course, will continue. We would just lose the $98,000 of reimbursement. So distinguishing that from a program like Workforce or CDBG, that, yeah.
Okay, what else do you have for us?
What other good news you have?
Tell me something good.
So Terry's not here, but it came up yesterday about, in admin services, about quarterly reporting, actual versus budget, you know, and I guess where I'm stuck a little is that, you know, if it's too much or it's not enough. So I came up with something.
Honestly, can you, so some of us who didn't listen to that meeting, can you kind of?
Well,
I think the context is, Member Greeno had raised the question again about a board member's ability to amend the budget when it's put on display in October, right? And I think we answered that pretty concretely, that it's really to be put on display. And the amendment is to occur after it's been put on display. And that's how we've been doing this. But in that context, you really were generally expressed a desire to get more information sooner and was hopeful that staff would be presenting more of an ongoing presentation of the budget, and largely through this committee. She's not able to hear today, so I'm trying to really say that, but to that end, I think we talked about maybe a little bit more of a different kind of quarterly update or something like that. Or, I mean, it's always there.
I think she's thinking, like, from a business standpoint, you see P&L every month.
If you want to look at it.
Yeah, but that P&L will show, depending, will show you your actuals and actuals to budget and, all these types of things. And I think the thought process is that if we were to see that regularly, then come budget time, they'd be maybe more prepared for where money's being spent and happening. I think the challenge of that is that, money doesn't kind of flow like it does in a business. Transportation's spending tons of money right now, but, on the road.
Not yet, but
it will be.
It will be.
There's gonna be, the offset
Right.
when things happen are different, so it's really hard to say. You can look at something now and say you only spent 10%, knowing that the other 80% is gonna hit in October.
We got two big revenue dumps a year.
Yeah.
Property tax.
Yeah.
I guess,
So,
okay, so board members have the ability to go to Questica any point in time that they want and look at as much financial data as their heart desires. Everything is there. So is the point that we collectively as an organization need to do a better job of pulling out of Questica information for board members so they don't have to go into Questica? Or, I guess I'm asking that question because they actually, not just board members, anybody, public can go there and look at whatever the heck they want to look at as long as they want to look at it. They can spend.
Well, and I think that's the challenge is, we have 40 funds and 3,000 lines of budget and so but then, rolled up to just the object level is too summarized versus too detailed. So I came up with this and I can build this in Questica and I thought maybe it would be more of a one size fits all. So revenue, we've seen this before with major revenues, just like where we are getting and it's lagging the sales tax. I just updated it now because we just got the distribution for some of these sales tax. So that one's the same, but then for these, looking at general fund only by department. And again, I can send this to you, I just wanted some ideas of, because I was kind of hearing that maybe what was needed wasn't out there, but I wasn't exactly sure, what would be helpful.
Well, okay.
I think this
Is
what the answer is.
okay, but that's just once a year.
No, but I know, but if that can be done quarterly.
Well, this is the contract.
No, I know, but I'm saying.
Oh, format-wise?
Format-wise, I think,
Oh.
Okay.
I'm almost thinking that.
Okay, but let me be very blunt here. Is it Terry that's asking or is it the board that's asking? Is it even the committee that's asking? Because I don't, it's not that we shouldn't take individual board members' thoughts, concerns into account, but again, one board member does not direct staff to do stuff, right?
I would say that.
I think that all the information's there if you want to take the time to get the information. And I think
It is there.
and I think staff is more than happy to answer questions if you have a question about something that you're seeing that don't understand. I don't think there's a necessity to develop and implement some type of report because potentially you're not interested in looking for the information or find it cumbersome to get the information. It's all there. And when I'm sitting around on a Friday night with nothing to do, I love going to the looking through that stuff.
That says a lot about.
My wife starts throwing things at me. But it's all there. And I've never had a problem asking anybody at staff, can you give me something like this? And because I can't figure that out. And I always preface it, if it's going to take a long time, forget it. But, you know, I think it's one person that's looking for the information. I guess a long way to say it. Thanks.
Go ahead.
All I was gonna say is I think we've kind of struggled with this for a long time. I mean, from day one that I've been here, and then back when I was on the other board, it's just how do you present the information? And then it's like if you do the variance report, then it's gotta be, well, why is that so far off? And then it was you had to have the description, and then it was a certain percentage over, or it was whatever it is, and we kind of worked that one out. We tried the variance report here for a little while. So I think this is great until it's not, right? Until it doesn't provide you the information you want. So then I think it's challenging. I'm not saying yes or no. I don't wanna do that necessarily, but I just think this is a really challenging thing. And so maybe it's more of, hey, I got a question about this. Can we generate a report that in this moment would answer that question? I don't know. I mean, because it's a lot.
It would be helpful too if it was, like it did like a little narrative about this is maybe an issue. Because I think it's hard too when you don't understand the whole picture. Like if you're looking at just one percentage on here, you know, having a context.
Well, we have talked about, you know, having a dashboard type product that would be pulling from the data in Questica, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't quite have that yet.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be one solution that you could have a dashboard that would be easily accessible on your home screen or something.
Spotlight, do you guys like that for the budget presentation?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I guess that would be, I don't want to say a high level, but that would be a quick glance to be able to see what numbers are so that someone could look at that and get a idea of where, not only where we're at in the budget, but like what was budgeted and it'd be a quick snapshot, I guess. But it'd be pulling from Questica the data, so it wouldn't be something that you would have to necessarily update.
Right.
Maybe that's a direction we could go, I don't.
I'll work on that. That should be pretty easy.
I mean, is that, go ahead.
I really appreciate what staff does routinely to provide us all of the information that we request. I think we've been at this process on Questica to kind of provide information and to clarify information and to perfect the information. If we want to, we could keep doing that for the rest of our lives. And we could keep saying, do more, do more, do more. It's here. We have to take the time to look at it, and if we have questions, as John said, contact staff and get your clarification. I just don't think we need to put more on top of you. She's got a big job. Let's let it go. And I just feel like we could continue to do this. And I'm gonna say something, Carrie, I apologize, but you're so dang nice. Quit being so dang nice and saying, yeah, I'll do that. Just, you know, just enough, enough is enough, you know? And I just want to, you know, I thank you for everything you've done. It's here. Let's look at it. And if we have a question, call Carrie. Don't worry about producing anything else. That's my opinion.
I have a question for you then. No, I do, because if pulling together a dashboard is easy enough to do, because you would set up the program, right, and then which is filled on it. And if that would answer some of the questions so that people weren't going, because I understand that if we can go and ask questions, but you got an 18-member board. So if there's some easy to pull together that could answer some of that, get some of that out there. And would that be okay, or do you say
I'm
not
fine
no
with
to
that. Nope, I'm fine with that. I think that's great. But you know, at some point, we're gonna have to say enough is enough.
Oh,
You know, so I just believe, sure, if the dashboard is easy, by all means, that's great. But let's give her a freaking break, with all due respect.
Okay. Hey, what else you got good for news?
I think that's it.
Okay.
I'll start working on the budget, now that we're done with the fight.
You didn't even talk about your gift basket.
Oh, my award-winning office? You guys will have to stop in and see.
No, your spa gift basket.
Yeah, that's what I got it for my office.
Oh, really?
I finally hung some pictures up after 2 years. And I won a prize.
You won the prize. You won the wellness prize.
Well, I have to say, the wellness challenge was really great, because that stuff actually really helps me to like declutter. I put up some pictures of my like vacation snapshots, and very calm in there now. You guys can come and visit.
She has a little bonsai plant that you can go do Zen. She has like
Yep.
a little labyrinth that you can kind of walk around if you want.
And they provided us with giant Jenga. So every time you walk by, you gotta try to.
Pop a block out.
Well, she left.
All right.
We do get some done though, I promise. That's it, unless you guys have questions.
No.
Next month, Baker Tilly will be here.
Oh, boy.
So plan for a nice long meeting.
That's always a joy.
I'm very excited about. I have to say, it's been a lot of work, a lot.
Let's face it, you're excited about having somebody else in the hot seat. That's what.
Well, it's not, it's the joy seat.
Yeah, it
The
is.
joy, because you're doing things.
Yes, we're done with that.
It'll be June and we're actually getting a report. I mean, that's,
We will be done before May 31st.
well, I know, but he'll be here in June.
Yeah.
All right, Scott, what do you got for Natural McHenry County?
First off, thank you to everybody who stopped by the new Natural McHenry County offices on the 23rd in advance of the strategic planning session. What a really cool space, wasn't it? And they're really excited, especially when the farmer's market opens up. They have much more exposure, more walk-in traffic. So really excited about that. A couple of key things that they're working on. Strategic plan for Natural McHenry County has been in development, and we're still working on that. So more to come, but it's, we're really excited. Strategic planning is so essential to any organization. And the other thing is the budget development. Natural McHenry County follows the state's fiscal year, so this year ends June 30th, it begins July 1st. So we're developing the budget. The one real thing that weighs heavily on our minds is really the state funding, because at large, over $300 and some thousand of their funding comes through that state tourism grant. For budgetary purposes, we are just planning on the same amount as last year. We're somewhat confident about that, but once again, it's the state, and the state's facing their own challenges, so we're not sure where that's going to come in. But that's what we're working on, and looking forward to a fantastic tourist season coming up.
Amen to that.
Amen.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:48. Brian? John?
I'm staying.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.